Alright, welcome everyone. This is Semblance of Sanity. I'm Jacob, and today I am bringing to you the podcast with one slight change. As you can see, Caleb is not here. That means that I get to talk about whatever I want. So, for today, I'm going to be talking about a movie that is very near and dear to my heart that Caleb has not seen yet. Which really sucks, because it's really good. Maybe you guys could help me convince him to actually sit down and watch it. But before we get into that, let's go through the announcements, because we do have some important ones. So first off, VidMe's shutting down. Like, they just said, okay, we're done. You know, they weren't making enough money, or however, I don't know what the reason is. But they're done. So that means, for Hunter x Hunter reactions, they will not be on VidMe, of course. We have a solution to that, so don't worry. You'll still get them as per the norm. But they might be a little bit different. Also, we have a P.O. box now. So if you want to send us anything or whatever, the information for that will be in the description. And then for the weekly schedule, so you already got your Death Parade episode, right? So tomorrow's Tuesday, so you got Hunter x Hunter. Wednesday, Made in Abyss. Thursday, Hunter x Hunter again. Friday, My Hero Academia. Saturday, just JoJo's. I know. Just JoJo's? What? Ruby, we cannot do because we haven't seen it yet, because Caleb's not here. I very much would like to see that Ruby episode, like, stat, but I need to wait, so, yeah. Sucks to be me, right? But, and then Sunday, Hype Q. Then it all starts over again. Now, before I get into one of my favorite movies, Patreon shout out. I hope I'm saying this right, but Urki Penna, you were one of our first patrons, certainly at VIP level, and I just want to say thank you so much for being so generous and believing in us, because that was a really big deal. Like, because we weren't sure about the whole Patreon thing. We didn't exactly know what was going to happen. We certainly didn't expect the kind of amazing success we've been having. And you believing in us really meant a lot. It still does. So thank you. Now, guys, we are in December now. So it's actually kind of a fitting time to talk about this, because it is a Christmas movie that I'm going to be mentioning here. A few of you probably can see this coming, because you know that I love this movie and that I've wanted to talk about it for a long time. But that is the Disappearance Movie. So, Caleb, if you are watching this, leave now. Just go, shoo. Yeah, because, spoilers. If you have not seen the Disappearance Movie, leave now. Go watch it. If you haven't seen, and this is the Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. It's a 2010 movie made as a continuation for the 2006 anime, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's amazing. The dub's amazing. There is this little arc called Endless 8, but it's amazing. Even though Endless 8 should never have happened. So, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you don't want to watch the series, you still can watch the movie on its own, because it's that amazing of a movie. Even without the context, even without that breadcrumb trail that you probably missed when you first watched the series. Even without actually seeing the series, you can watch the movie. But it does a lot of callbacks to the show. And it is just amazing. So if you want to make sure that you have the full experience, go watch the show first, then watch the movie. You will love it. If you watch the movie, you can still watch the show later, and you'll actually end up probably having a much better appreciation for the show. But they're two very different kinds of things. They're very different styles. So just be warned. The show is very wacky, fun adventure time. And the movie is a bit different. So, Let's hope I can do this because it's just me talking about this, but I really love this movie. I love what it did. So, here we go. Um, so, I'm going to start this off with talking about the fact that this movie does something really, really well. A lot of times in stories, you'll rely on some sort of external plot, some conflict, some bad thing that's happening, as a way to sort of fill the gaps, give a reason for why your characters are doing what they're doing, right? And that's not a bad thing. That is not at all a bad thing. But when you can get a story that completely revolves around characters' desires and wants, it is such a gem. It is such a gem. And there are a lot of movies that I love that do that. You know, A Silent Voice, Wolf Children. You know, there's plenty out there, and they're fantastic. But with the Disappearance movie, I would say it's even more important that it does this, because in the show, that was actually kind of the main area where the show lacked. It didn't really do too much character development that you could see. After watching the Disappearance movie, you can actually go back and watch and see that there's plenty of little bits of character development that are amazing, sprinkled all throughout. But without the events of the Disappearance movie, you don't actually realize that that's going on. And if for some reason you're still here and you haven't seen the movie, the world changes. Haruhi's God, and she disappears. She never existed. And suddenly, Kyon, now... Because, okay, I love this. All right, me and Caleb have talked before about how you don't generally want to have the apathetic protagonist. And this is one of those specific examples where I would say it worked, specifically in the show, especially because... Kyon was the main character, but Haruhi was also kind of the main character, you know? And she definitely cared about the world, right? So he was just dragged along through it. And it was great. He was the... Because I would say the reason a lot of times stories will do these sort of like blank slate protagonist, at least in the beginning, is because it's an easy way to basically get the audience inserted into the story, right? Self-insert characters are not inherently bad. You can quote me on that. They serve a purpose, and it can be a very good thing. The thing is that you want them to grow and have depth and have you basically see the kind of person they are as the story progresses. You didn't really get too much of that from Kyon in the show. Now, that wasn't too much of a problem because it was just a very fun, you know, zany show, and Kyon's sarcastic internal commentary was amazing. Another reason to watch the dub. However, in the Disappearance movie, they turned that upside down. Because now all of a sudden, the very thing that Kyon was always wishing, evidence to the theory that Kyon is actually God, Haruhi's gone. She never existed. He can have his normal life now. Isn't that great? And it absolutely scares the crap out of him. Because suddenly he just wakes up and it's different. It's this great It's a Wonderful Life twist. And I'll go more into that later. But we get to see this completely new side of Kyon. Completely new side. Because he's terrified now. Of course he is, right? What does it even mean to have Haruhi vanish, not exist? She's God, right? And it's such a good way to basically ground the starting conflict. And granted, the movie did take a little while to get to that conflict, you know, because they had to reestablish basically that what the status quo was. But oh boy, and like I remember when I first watched that movie, I was completely like on the edge of my seat because they even tell you with the conflict, Haruhi disappears, right? But once you see Kyon like starting to unravel as he's like, holy hell, what do I do now? Is there any way to fix this? Can I fix this? Like, because all the other hijinks that happened in the show were because of Haruhi. But now Haruhi's not there. There's nothing weird about this world. He has no one with powers to undo things. So what does he do? And the level of emotion you get from Kyon in this movie, especially in those beginning parts, it's just great. Like, you feel for the guy. And it's one of those things where you can't, like, or at least for me, I couldn't help but wonder, yeah, if I was in that sort of a situation, that, like, I would freak out. Like, what can you do? Like, yeah, because you can get used to all the stuff when it's like, okay, Haruhi's there, and, it'll all sort of turn out well eventually because she's God, so, unless she actually wanted the world to go up in flames, it wouldn't. Yeah, it's really good. And here's the other thing. Because Haruhi's gone, the mystery of how was this changed and all that, it feels so much more real. Because one of the things that, in the show, like, you might have gotten this too, but I know for me, I felt like there was this sense of, like, quite literally, like, plot armor. Because Haruhi's God, right? It's like with the Remote Island Syndrome. She didn't actually want someone to die. They addressed that, and then they're like, no, but she's God, so she would, she won't be able to get tricked by her own desires, right? Because she's God. But then once she's gone, then it opens up everything. And, like, because, okay, a lot of times, like, I'm not actually that big of a mystery fan. Like, I don't generally love, like, stories that revolve around mystery, because a lot of the times I don't care about the mystery. Let's say it's a murder mystery. Okay, those have been done so many times, and I can't exactly relate to seeing someone, like, killed, so why should I care? If it's something where the character that's killed, you knew and cared about them, then absolutely. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. But usually that's not the case, and in the case of the Disappearance movie, because you have so much of an attachment to the characters, to Haruhi and, maybe not Koizumi, or Mikuru, but to just all the characters, you're wondering, where are they? What happened? How do we get this back to normal? So you're, like, I was very much, like, right alongside Kyon as he's going around trying to get things fixed. And, like, okay, so this story is basically It's a Wonderful Life, which I think is awesome, because for one, okay, it fits along with the Christmas time whole deal. It's a Wonderful Life is an amazing story, and It's a Wonderful Life, like, I can't think of many other stories that rip off It's a Wonderful Life, right? Like, there aren't too many, and if they are out there, I'm guessing the reason I haven't heard of them is because they're not that good. But in this, I didn't actually realize that this was an It's a Wonderful Life story. I didn't. I mean, who would expect an anime to retell a classic like that? But that's what it is. Like, and I just think that's amazing. But one of the specific reasons why that's so amazing is because then the conflict is all around, what does Kyon actually want? And throughout the story, even though he's going through the actions to try and fix things, right? Because there's this crazy stuff happening, of course he'd try and fix it, but he's still not exactly sure whether he wants to fix it. Like, he does want to fix it, but is this actually, like, he has what he always wanted now. He should be happy, right? He should be able to go about his normal life and forget that all of the antics around Haruhi ever happened. Aliens, time travelers, and espers, they're gone. You got this. This is it. And the fact that they also didn't make it, like, so cut and dry, but they let that question sort of stew, I love that. Because again, the movie is a long movie, so if they had made it cut and dry, it wouldn't have, like, the rest of the movie would have felt kind of dull, because it'd be like, or a bit, not completely dull, because the mystery was a really good one. And they did a good job of making it intense. But then it would have felt like it came to an end. And the way they resolve, Kyon's, like, desires and what he wants and everything, the way they do that is so good. Because when he decides to go back, like, okay, the fact the fact that, like, I remember when I first watched the movie. Okay, here's the other thing. A lot of people rant about it being too long, but I would say that was because when I first watched it, I didn't know how long it was. So I was watching it, and I'm all thinking, they gotta resolve this somehow, right? They just have to, because plot conventions, right? They're not going to completely, like, erase 80% of the story and the whole premise for the story. They're just not going to do that. But as I kept watching, I'm like, but, like, with the amount of time that's passed and where they are in the story, what are they going to do? They don't have enough time to actually resolve it, because I didn't realize it was a 2 hour and 40-minute movie. I figured it was just a normal 2 hours. And then when he actually, like, when Taniguchi mentions Haruhi, and he's just like, what? And, like, it dawns on him that, like, there's an out, there's something connecting me to the previous world. I felt so, like, elated and overjoyed and just like, yes, there's a way out. Right along there with him, and that is so hard to get in a story. Because, I mean, like, no matter what happens, unless it's some sort of, like, dark tragedy or whatever, unless you're talking, like, Grave of Fireflies, everything's gonna sort of work out somehow in the end. There, it might be maybe a bittersweet victory, or the heroes might lose, or whatever. But the general story that's there will still continue. And maybe if I had thought about it, like, more like, from a distance, I would be like, okay, well, something's going to happen, even if it seems to be taking a long time to get there. And I love that whole scene. Like, oh. And then when he actually goes to the school, and he's, like, waiting and waiting and waiting, and then suddenly he sees Haruhi. Oh, yeah, and that was even after he already found out that oh, yeah. Oh, and this was the other thing. Okay, so the fact that he found Nagato, and that Yuki was basically just not a normal person, but certainly not an alien robot, whatever she was, right? That's, like, and the way they lead up to that with him going to the club room, and he's like, this is the last line of defense, if we're defeated here, game over, right? That was so good, because Yuki was always the one who could fix Haruhi's antics, basically. Either Yuki or Kyon, right? And the fact that she can't do anything, doesn't remember, you're just like, oh my gosh. And then the fact, but then there's the message that's saying there's a time limit, but you have no idea what it means, or, how to, like, fix things. You think it's like getting the people back into the room because, the keys, but you're not entirely sure. And okay, in hindsight, when you think about that scene, like, when I think about that scene, I'm like, okay, anytime you have a mystery, you look for motive first, right? Who would actually gain by this happening? And that's where usually the mystery sort of just fades away, right? You can tell who it is. If, assuming they haven't been drawn with, like, a goatee or whatever, or, like, starring this person in this single episode, you can usually figure out who it is. But because they didn't do that, and because, for a few reasons, the whole motive thing sort of was able to get thrown out the window. One, because it's what Kyon wanted, actually. Like, he seems to be the one that would be gaining, except that it's not actually what he wanted. Be careful what you wish for, kind of a thing. Two, this is Haruhi we're talking about. Random stuff just happens just because she had a whim, right? So if anything, you're wondering, like, did Haruhi just write herself out of existence? But then how would that happen, and would she still be the one to fix it if that was the case? And anyway, so, and granted, I'm not the best person at figuring out mysteries. Like if there's enough red herrings, I just sort of, like, I just can't figure it out, because I don't tend to, like, go through those sorts of stories. But I totally did not expect that Nagato was the person who did everything. I totally didn't. Like, and again, in hindsight, I probably should have been able to, because she was the one who was the most different. But at the same time, when you're watching the movie, you're thinking, but of course she'd be the one that's the most different. She was fundamentally, like, not a human being. So if everything got turned back to normal, sure, Mikuru can't time travel and Koizumi doesn't have, psychic powers. But then, Nagato not only would not have the crazy data magic powers, no data integration thought entity thing or whatever, not only that, but she'd suddenly just be an actual human being. So, so I was able to excuse those sorts of things, but anyway, so, yeah. And when Kyon finally decides to go back, he's assembled everybody, and he finally decides to go back. The fact that there's real consequences to that. Because here's the thing. There have been parallel world, stories before or whatever, but there were never there never seemed to be real consequences to changing it back to the way things were. In fact, not only does there not seem to be any consequences, there seems to be no question of whether you would change it back to the way things were or not, right? It's obvious. Of course you would, right? And I still had that feeling when I was going through this movie. Of course, even with the whole, literature club, application form and all that stuff, of course he's going back, right? He has to. But that doesn't erase the fact that and it's even better once he actually realizes that Nagato was the one who did it. But you're still basically like this girl wanted a friend. She wanted you to stay, and nope. And because so often there isn't that kind of conflict, right? And the fact that they didn't stop there, but they took it even further, just makes it even. That just makes it even better. Yeah. Now, so when there's the reveal, right? When there's all the time traveling, they go back and, all the stuff to make everything work, and, he meets with the past Nagato and everything, and they don't actually say who it is, and you're like, wait, what? Why would they do that? Okay, so then they go there, and they're, okay, this is how you do the reset thing. And then you see Nagato walking up the street. And you're like, wait, what? No, wait, what? And then Kyon goes into his inner monologue. His finest and best inner monologue yet, probably ever. There have been so many stories that do android, humanity type stories, whether you're talking about like Data in Next Generation or Wall-E, right? But I never, first off, I just didn't like Data flat out because his sort of journeys and stuff, because the conflict didn't feel real. And maybe it was more accurate to what it would be like if a computer, super advanced android was like experimenting with emotion. But it still very much just seemed like experimenting with emotion. It seemed like, it's like, okay, he's just simulating. He's adding, some emotional programming, right? But there's no real, the conflict didn't feel real because that he's still Data. He's still an android full of logic and everything. And the whole point of emotion is that it clouds logic, right? And with something like Wall-E, that was fantastic. It was very, very sweet, right? But there still wasn't really much conflict around it. Wall-E was a robot that was more of a person. He had more humanity than, the whole planet at the beginning, because there's no humans there. But then even when he goes onto the ship, he has a lot more humanity than any of the people on the ship. and it did it, and they did a great story with that, of sort of the, that dissonance, right? Um, but in this, the conflict was real, like, because again, it was internal conflict. It wasn't just, because, okay, in Wall-E there's a conflict, and he helps to resolve said conflict, right? And a lot of it is because of, Wall-E's inherent humanity. But it's basically because of some external conflict, some external threat, whatever, that needs to be solved, right? But in this, they make it be completely internal conflict for Nagato. And the fact that they made all this mystery stuff and all this craziness happen, that it wasn't Haruhi, and then in fact it was Nagato, and it was simply because she wanted to be a normal person? Like, that's that whole scene with Kyon's monologue, because a lot of the times, Nagato would be the exposition person, but then since she doesn't really talk, Kyon gives the exposition of sort of his observations of Nagato, right? And that's your window into Nagato's world, right? But and of course Crispin Freeman does an amazing job, like a stellar job. And that part where, it's a collection of error data will build up and become triggers, and and all that, and it'll affect my behavior, and these are unavoidable because I don't yet know what the cause is. And he's like, "Oh, I do. They're called feelings." It was so good. And the way they use the shots of Nagato during that moment, when it's like, whether it's her just like sitting there, or her like in that distraught look as she's like in her room just staring at nothing, or and my personal favorite, when it shows her with all the different backgrounds, with like her looking up at the sky or whatever, and the one of her looking up at all the stars in the night sky. And the way they do that shot with making her seem so small and in this vast expanse, it's... So they could have done this internal dialogue with just focusing on Kyon, right? They had enough content to do that, because he still has to realize, what is it that I want, right? But now he's realizing what it is that she wants, that this was her actual assertion of, there's something I want, and I'm going to act on it, right? But they didn't just make it be about Kyon. They made it be so much more, and I love that. But then they still tied it back to Kyon at the end, and and he had that great moment. Of course it was fun. I loved every minute of it. Don't go asking me questions that are so obvious. And and then he goes through the, in his little mental, mind palace, whatever. He goes through the ticket taker, thing. And the little hand that was grabbing his coat just sort of lets go. And that, because you're so on board of like, yes, the world's changed back. Yes, Kyon knows what he wants. Yes, he's a full-fledged member of the SOS Brigade now. Oh crap, that's right. Even though they were created, even though the alternate Nagato was someone that was basically just created because Nagato decided to change the world, that was still a person. And in fact, that was like the manifestation of Nagato's deepest like wish, to be a person. If you like, holy crap. And oh, by the way, well, I'll get to that in a bit later, but there are a lot of things that they do in the show that lead up to this really well. But for now, the next part that I want to talk about, Kyon's talking with Yuki on the roof of the hospital after it's all resolved and everything's all settled. Yuki hardly ever talks, like, in general. And even at this point, she says, like, a couple things, right? Most of it's just Kyon talking. Maybe, like, sometimes interpreting, like, what he thinks she's thinking, you know? But it feels like a little kid coming up to their parents and basically realizing that, like, I did something bad, you know, and now I'm going to be punished, right? And one of the reasons I love this scene so much, they do this throughout the movie, throughout the rest of the show, but I thought about titling this podcast, little special deal thing that it is, audience imagination, because in books they're dealing straight with your imagination, right? They're helping guide it. In movies and shows, that happens less because there's a visual medium. The idea is that you already have all the information that you need to know. But with this, they didn't do that. They would have those lingering moments where it's just her not saying anything. Just, you know, and just focusing on the most minute actions, you know, looking at her hands, looking up at the snow as it's falling from the sky. It engages, because it's basically a blank space. They're saying, there's a blank space, there's something here. What is going on inside her head? You don't know. They never actually really tell you. But it lets you wonder about it. And I love that, because so many times a story will basically set up some awesome mystery or something, right? If you haven't, by the way, J.J. Abrams has a great TED Talk on the mystery box. Watch it if you haven't. I highly recommend it. But and the way he basically talks about it is sometimes the actual mystery itself is better than the revelation of the mystery, because a lot of times the revelation of the mystery can't hold up to what you pictured in your mind, right? You'll always be able to picture what would have been the perfect ending for you, the perfect reveal for you, whatever, right? It's kind of like in How in V for Vendetta, they never actually, like, take off his mask, right? You never see underneath it, even though you sort of know what's there. So the fact that they did this, like, this is one of my favorite conversations in storytelling, even though there isn't really much of a conversation at all. It, you know, but and people who say that this isn't a Christmas movie, that it just is around Christmas time, but that doesn't really make it a Christmas movie, I will fight you on that. Because that part where Kyon basically says, well, you can tell the data integration thought entity to go to hell, like, you know, you're one of us, you're part of the team, right? It's like he's reinforcing the error data that Nagato had when she decided to change the world. And she still has the error data. Like, she might have, you know, it might have, the space-time continuum might have been put back together or whatever. But that doesn't mean that there isn't that part of her that still wishes to be a normal girl. And in that moment, it's like, that is like, when people talk about, like, the Christmas spirit or whatever, like, you know, it's kind of hard to pin down what exactly they're talking about. Is it just, you know, warm, fuzzy feelings for the sake of commercialism or whatever? Who knows? But that... I love that part. I love that part so much. It's just great. And... yeah. This whole movie is just... for someone who is a huge fan of the show, you know? Like as soon as I heard the premise of the show, I was like, I'm going to love that show. Yeah. But they fit all those little references to the show throughout it, including Endless 8, because that's very important. The idea that, oh, yeah, the whole stuck in a time loop thing, there's consequences for that, even if you're the person who shouldn't have consequences from that. You know, it's so great. Like, because this movie, it's not just that it uses the stuff from the show. It uses stuff from the show that you didn't actually know were there, which gives you fresh perspective when you go back and rewatch the show. Like, there's the obvious ones like Endless Eight, right? And then you realize, like, oh, when I actually watched through it, and I thought I was going crazy watching the same thing over again, and over again, and I'm saying, like, Nagato, why don't you do something? Help them! You know what's actually going on! And you realize, oh, wait a minute. And you start asking those questions. Maybe she did try to help and it didn't work. Maybe that was where the whole error data thing started from, where she felt like an outsider in there or whatever. But then there's the less obvious ones. There's like the in the what was it? In the remote island syndrome, when she's not letting anyone in. And it's, the whole joke that she's like, no, you said not to let anyone in, so I will not let anyone in, and it's like, no, let me in. No. Those little things are great. But then there's things like Day of Sagittarius, right? That's probably my favorite episode from the show. I love that episode so much. It's so much fun. And there's the obvious thing of like Nagato wanting to win and actually getting competitive and stuff like that. And it's great fun. It's a fantastic episode. I've rewatched that episode so many times. But one of the things that I didn't notice right away when I rewatched it, it took a couple times. Someone else pointed it out to me. But it's at the end, right? When the computer club is trying to get Yuki to join the computer club, right? And Kion's like, do whatever you want. And they focus on Nagato as she looks down and is like, oh, perhaps I will. And that's the episode right before Someday in the Rain, which I also love that episode, even though it was a complete, they wasted a lot of time, and it was for, cutting budget corners and stuff like that, saving money and everything, and I still love that episode, because then, because then that episode is, basically the precursor to the Disappearance Movie. It's all this different context. And while you hated it when you watched it the first time because you didn't have the information of the Disappearance Movie, after you've seen the Disappearance Movie, then all those, 3-minute pauses where it's just Nagato, turning pages in a book and in an empty, silent room with, some voices from, one of the other adjacent rooms or something like that. It, at least for me, it makes me wonder. I know that it's still just, them cutting corners and all that. They had to save money or whatever. But I still like to think maybe that it wasn't an accident that they chose that episode to cut corners on, right? And anyways, my favorite part about that episode, and you might not have noticed this actually, because who rewatches Someday in the Rain, right? If you go back and rewatch that episode after having seen the Disappearance Movie, if you notice, and you might have noticed this when you first watched it, I don't know, when I first watched it, I was so just upset at how boring it was that I wasn't really reading into it. But when Kion comes in and falls asleep, and Nagato's the only other person in the room at that point, he falls asleep, and then it shows Nagato close the book and stand up. Immediately when she stands up, it cuts, right? And then Kion wakes up, and he's got a coat over him. It's actually 2 coats, but you don't notice that at first, right? And Haruhi's standing there, and she's making this, ridiculous face, just and it's oh, yeah. It's not like I like you or anything, baka, But then Kion's oh, there's 2 jackets, and he's oh, Miss Hasina was changing in here, oh, And then he's oh, there's 2 jackets. Oh, and he looks at the rack where Mikuru's dress is or something like that, right? And then he hangs up the other coat, gives Haruhi back her coat, and they leave, right? Oh yeah, and this is the other thing. So before Kion fell asleep, he was coming back with the heater, right? And he's all oh, it's so cold. He turns it on, and he's all warming himself up, and then he falls asleep. And then, Yuki stands up, immediate cut. Well, the theory, the question, right? And it's not like this is mine. Like a bunch of other people have wondered this too when they actually like noticed that, because a lot of people didn't notice it because again, it's Someday in the Rain, boring episode, right? You're not expecting anything really at that point. But it's, wait a minute, did Yuki actually give him a coat? And once I saw that and I actually realized that they like left that little bit like up in the air, even though Kyon would never think that Yuki actually gave him her coat, he's like, oh, it must have been Asahina or something. But it could have been her coat. And that I would say is one of the best ways to, like, the best ways I've ever seen for people to take the aspect of the robot that is, that has some emotions, right? And experimenting with it, because when it's like something like not stepping on a bug or whatever, something like that, that's almost too heavy-handed, I would say, because then there's no conflict about it. But and the fact that they didn't actually show it, I love that so much. It's another one of those things where it engages the audience's imagination, not just when you are there watching the show, reading the book, whatever. But outside of that, that's what makes shows like, if you can get the audience like to do like theory crafting, if there actually are like unresolved mysteries, heck, shipping, right? It's all things where basically you're instead of just bringing the audience into your world while you're there with the story, because that's why we love stories, right? You're brought into some world, whether it's an actual like fantastical world or some slice of life, whatever it is, right? But when you can get the audience's imagination spinning so that even after they put the book down, even after they, leave Netflix or whatever, their mind is still spinning about that, and they're still in that world, even though they're not actually digesting, your story material. That's something special. Like, this scene drove me crazy for like probably months, because I was just like, they were totally hiding it and everything, like, and holy crap, that's amazing. I love it. Right? And it's the precursor to the Disappearance Movie. You might dismiss it, if you haven't seen the movie or whatever. But then once you watch the movie, you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And this is the thing that absolutely blew my mind about it. So, in the previous movie, at one point, I was rewatching Days of Sagittarius, like I do rather often. And I ended up just letting the ending play through, Haru Kai, woohoo. I didn't actually dance to it, no. No. But, and then it goes to the next episode, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to watch the next episode, it's Someday in the Rain, right? There is that part at the end, but, whatever, that's not worth rewatching the whole episode. And then I didn't actually realize before that the person who gives the next episode announcements is Nagato. And the next episode announcement for Someday in the Rain is, next episode, Someday in the Rain. You'll catch a cold. Usually that part would be basically summarizing the episode, right? And that's basically confirming that, yes, the whole point of the episode is the fact that Nagato basically sympathized with Kyon's being really, really cold and lent him a coat. And even though it's like, yes, that's a completely like simple thing to do, what's that line from Toradora? It's those no big deal things that matter the most, right? Anyway, so yeah, I absolutely love the Disappearance Movie. And again, just to like recap, summarize, one of the most amazing things about the Disappearance Movie to me is not just that it did Yuki's development, and not just that it did Kyon's development, but it did them both. It didn't have to. It could have just done one or the other, and it would have worked. I was not expecting all this development for Yuki when I watched the movie, right? I'm just like, oh, there's development for Kyon. That's great. This is a fantastic addition to the franchise. But double prizes. Anyways. I loved this movie so much that I actually like. I know a lot of, like, when there was that spin-off that, came out, the Disappearance of Nagato Yuki-chan or whatever. A lot of people didn't really like it for good reasons. Um, it, like, it wasn't good for the beginning, anyways. But that that arc at the end, and the fact that they reused the name for the episode, "Someday in the Rain," that made it all worth it to me. When I still go back and try and watch it, I'll like end up like choking at how, like, fluffy, no substance, romantic comedy it is, even with the same voice actors. But I'm so glad I watched it. That show, that spin-off series, even made me so nostalgic for the series and the show, or the series and the movie and everything as a whole. I even wanted to go back and rewatch Endless 8. Like, like when I think about Haruhi as a show, Disappearance Movie and the series and all that, like, it is by no means a perfect show. I mean, that doesn't really exist. I get that. There are landmines to avoid. Even with that little, even with the stuff that Endless 8 adds, if you have seen it, there is no good reason for them to have actually done Endless 8 the way they did it. I think they did it just because they wanted to end, like, before the Disappearance Movie would have started. That way they could do the whole movie as a movie instead of having it sort of bleed into the show or whatever, or so that they could do it justice as a movie, not shoehorning it in or whatever. But there's no reason that they should have done that. But I just really love this show so much. That whole twist that they did with Nagato's character, and the fact that it was tied to the internals, right? Not just a twist for the sake of a twist, and the fact that the twist revealed this breadcrumb trail that was throughout the show, it blows my mind. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I want to be able to do in my stories. Like, holy crap. I just, So, hopefully one of these days I will be able to get Caleb to actually watch the Disappearance Movie. I got him to go through the necessary episodes of Haruhi, not Endless 8, but, he knows about Endless 8. He knows what it is. There's no way he'd watch that, but still need to get him to actually watch it. So, yeah. Hopefully I can, like, maybe this Christmas season or something, but, yeah. Anyways, that's the end of this crazy podcast special thing. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Disappearance Movie and, all the stuff that I talked about in this crazy rant. And if there are any other shows that you would say I need to watch, like, having heard this, let me know. Of course, no spoilers or even semblance of spoilers, because, yeah. But this is one of those stories that I love talking to people about, and unfortunately there aren't too many people that I can talk about it with, because usually I talk to most of these things with Caleb. And of course, hey, there's the Discord. So if you want to, like, talk more, like, in depth or whatever, not just, like, because YouTube comments are kind of for that. Check out the Patreon, get on the Discord. But yeah, anything you want to shout out, anything I missed. I mean, this is, for the most part, this was basically doing it like I had a list of, like, bullet points, but this was basically doing it from memory. So I might have missed some things. But anyways, thank you for sticking around with me through this. We're into the Christmas season. I need to watch Disappearance again. But yeah, this has been Semblance of Sanity. My name is Jacob, and I will see you all next time.